Over the years, Joe Rogan has brought awareness to just how horrifying animals can truly be.
Did you ever see the video where the BBC reporter gets inside a box and the polar bear is trying to eat him through this box, trying to figure out how to get to him because it knows he's in this box? It is terrifying.
Dude, why would you ever? God damn, dude, that would me up.
Look at this, man. That's glass, man. If it breaks, you're dead. If it breaks, you're dead.
It's trying to, it wants to get its teeth through it.
Bro, when it's opening its mouth, that's a monster's mouth.
He's also talked about some of the most brutal times animals have attacked us humans.
Folks at home, prepare. Don't show it on the screen because it's rough. This is no nose. See how he bit his nose off?
God.
Yeah. Look at his face.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
He was conscious, they said, after this happened.
Oh, yeah, of course. Look at his, see his right hand and the fingers bitten off? Wow. That's what they do. They bite off your fingers. That's the chimp right there.
Hit that like button and subscribe right now. Today, we're telling the true stories behind the most terrifying animal attacks ever mentioned on the Joe Rogan podcast. Welcome to Final Affliction. In the Joe Rogan Experience number 1447, with his guest Tom Segura, Joe Rogan mentions one of the most gruesome bear attacks ever.
Did you see that video that was going around about that guy who got his face literally eaten off by a grizzly? And then he shot the grizzly when it was on top of him?
No.
Oh, dude. Have you seen it, Jamie?
Yeah, because he's talking. He's like going around giving interviews. Yeah.
He's talking while his face is gone. And he's talking about, like, you could see one eye through this mass.
I mean, if Jamie shakes his head like that.
Yeah, I'm going to show it to you real quick.
Oh, God damn it.
Yeah, I can't show
Wait,
it.
Yeah, we
there's
can't really
video
show it
of
online.
the...
Oh, yeah, of his face.
But
his face
of the
hanging
attack,
up.
too?
No, it's right after the attack. The guy that was with him started filming it. And it's just one of those things where, okay, so this is the bear, and this is the guy, and that's his face. Okay. And this is him talking.
Where are you seeing this? Nah, I'm good. I'm good. Is it on Instagram?
Yes. Bro, the thing chewed his face up.
That's him now?
That's what he looks like now. They rebuilt his face.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
The man they are talking about is Wes Perkins. This is his story. In May 2011, Wes and two hunting buddies, Dan and Edward Stang, arrived in Seward Peninsula ready to hunt some bears together. They were avid outdoorsmen and regularly organized trips together to escape from the noise of their towns. A few days into their trip, they found the tracks of a large male bear and began to follow them into the snow using their snowmobiles. They could tell from the paw prints that this animal was an incredible size and would be the talk of the town if they were able to hunt and kill it. Suddenly, the tracks disappeared. Wes got off of the vehicle and searched the ground for any sign of the bear. Little did he know, the bear was watching him from 70 feet away and was just waiting for the perfect moment to strike, the moment that the hunter would become the hunted. The bear suddenly pounced, launching himself through the trees and straight towards Wes. Hearing the rustle behind him, Wes turned and was horrified to see the huge male bear rushing towards him with murder in his eyes. He tried to grab for his rifle, for anything that he could use in defense, but the bear was too fast. Instead of the weak and vulnerable bears they were expecting, this animal was in the prime of his health and ravenous from a long hibernation, about hungry enough to eat a human if he could get his paws on one. He knocked Wes to the ground as his massive frame smashed into him at 50 kilometers per hour and, in one swift movement, grabbed onto Wes's face. His head was dwarfed in comparison to this massive predator, and as he stared at the rows of teeth in front of his eyes, he knew that his chance of survival was very low from this point onwards. Almost immediately, the bear began to shake Wes like a dog would with a new toy, using all of his skills to try and kill his prey. As he shook, his teeth sank deeper into Wes's face, and he could hear his own skull cracking under the pressure that this animal was able to put him under. He bit more and more, harder and harder, trying to completely break his skull and end the whole ordeal. He forced his body into the ground, and began to claw away at his body in an attempt to shred him into pieces. Wes felt that he didn't have long left. His pain was fading away and replaced with adrenaline that he knew he had no energy to even use. Pieces of skin and bone were being flung from his body as the animal viciously tried to kill him. When his two friends finally arrived to the scene and saw the horrific scene, not knowing if he was alive or not, they shot the bear quickly and from a safe distance. The bear let go of Wes while letting out a growl of pain before running into the safety of the forest. Once the men were sure that the bear had fled, they immediately attended to their friend, but they were horrified by what they saw. Wes's bone structure in his face was completely destroyed, with a terrifying array of bite marks and missing bone fragments strewn across his whole body. He was completely unrecognizable, and the majority of his face was hanging by loose strands of skin. He was missing his nose, his jaw had been ripped from his face, and, at this point, he was completely blind, clawing at his airways in an attempt to breathe. The father and son began to try and save his life, knowing that they would only have a short amount of time before Wes would become unresponsive, either from passing out from the pain or succumbing to his injuries. They questioned him to try and find out any information from the attack that may help him, but with no jaw, he was finding it impossible to respond to anything. He began to use hand signals instead, the only way that Wes would be able to communicate for a very long time after the attack. They radioed to Nome, the nearest town, informing the rangers of the situation and begging them for help. After hearing about the intensity of the attack and the condition of Wes, helicopters were dispatched in minutes, flying to the scene in an attempt to save Wes while they had the chance. While they were waiting, Wes drifted in and out of consciousness as the blood loss from the attack began to take effect. Once he was recovered into the rescue helicopter, he was immediately flown to Harborview Hospital, where he immediately was placed into a coma. He spent 5 days in this coma and underwent 26 life-saving surgeries, totaling over $1 million in medical bills. His face was completely reconstructed with titanium, replaced parts of his jaw where the bear had ripped it clean off, and he was unable to speak or eat independently for many months to come. He was unable to eat any solid food, so everything had to be fed to him from a blender, and his sight was barely salvageable, reduced to only light and dark. He was left with just half a tongue, something that the doctors were not able to rectify. And while he is now able to talk, it's heartbreaking for a man who loved to talk as much as he did, having to suffer these life-changing disabilities. Once he was finally released from hospital, many months later, he then struggled with a methadone addiction due to the high pain that his injuries caused. He was unable to live life without the help of this drug, dulling the pain for hours on end, just for it to return with the same brutality as the day the attack happened. Luckily, with the support of his friends, family, and medical professionals, Wes was able to recover once again. The recovery process was long, painstakingly long, and there were times when Wes believed it would be easier to just die and escape the pain and horror of his ordeal. But he lived on. Despite the ferocity of the bear, the remoteness of the scene, and the horrific injuries that he sustained, Wes Perkins survived one of the worst bear attacks in history. Despite his ordeal, he says that he has no ill feelings towards bears, stating that they are neither good or bad, just wild animals, and people need to be careful around them. Wild animals will behave like wild animals. They are unpredictable and dangerous, but as long as you stay aware of your surroundings, then you should be able to survive. He is no longer able to hunt as he once did, but states that those who can should stay alert to stay alive and avoid the same fate as his own, having your face savagely bitten off by a bear and possibly meeting your final affliction. On the Joe Rogan Experience number 1563, with his guest Tony Hinchcliffe, Joe Rogan mentions one of the most common reasons that chimps attack.
They don't give a f you're injured. They have no remorse, right? And they're intelligent. So you have this thing that's not a dog, it's not a person. It's this weird in-between thing. It's an animal, but it's also intelligent. And so when you do something for someone else, but you don't do something for them, they get rage like horrific rage.
He goes on to tell one of the most famous chimp attack stories ever that will change the way you look at chimps forever.
Yeah, there's a famous story of this guy who had a pet chimp. And then the thing about chimps is you can keep them when they're young, and then they get older, and it's like a man. But a man that's 5 times stronger than you, and like, why is he going to listen to you? He's not going to listen to you. So I think he started biting off fingers. It's one of the things that chimps do. When chimps get mad at you, they bite off your finger. Yeah, just to let you know, they're the boss. So this guy gets rid of this chimp, brings it to a shelter. The shelter takes it in, and he goes to visit it every year. And the chimp goes to see him like, oh, my friend, I miss you. Why can't I come home? But he can't come home ever because he would just take over the house, right? Because he's a grown chimp. So this guy goes to visit the chimp, and he brings a birthday cake. Happy birthday, buddy. And the other chimps that are in cages right next to it are like, this didn't bring me a cake? I can't believe this. So they figure out a way to get out, and they got out, and they attacked the man, and they tore him apart. They tore his face off, they tore his dick off, they tore his feet off, they bit his fingers off. It's one of the most horrific, cruel attacks you'll ever hear of, because they did it to try to take away from him the things he wants and needs. Like, chimps recognize you need your fingers in order to do things, you need your face in order to see, you need your in order to so that's the things they go after. They don't just try to kill you, they try to take away what it means to be a human. So if you try to hide your hands, they'll pull your hands away from and open them up and bite them off like crazy with a rage-filled look in their eye. And they don't communicate with language, so they only have this sense in their head of what's fair and what's not fair and what you've done to them. So if you do something that makes them jealous, they think immediately you've done something bad to them. They don't think that, no, I just gave my friend a cake. You made them feel bad, so it's you. You made them feel bad, so they go right after you. This is
wow.
No nose. See how he bit his nose off?
God.
Yeah. Look at his face.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
He was conscious, they said, after this happened.
Oh yeah, of course. Look at his, see his right hand, the fingers bitten off. Wow. That's what they do. They bite off your fingers. That's the chimp right there.
The man in Joe Rogan's story is none other than St. James Davis and Mo the chimpanzee. This is their story.
He stuck his thumb in my eye and peeled off this side of my face over my other side of the face. Then he drugged me, bit off my heel, and he drugged me down a hill 30 feet.
St. James and LaDonna met in West Covina, California, and became high school sweethearts, dating for several years. Despite the growing pressure around them to finally tie the knot, the two stalled their holy matrimony. St. James had a few misgivings about settling down. As a NASCAR driver and car enthusiast, St. James felt marriage would hinder him from pursuing his passions. However, in 1966, he succumbed to the pressure, and their marriage was put in place in a small brick church in the same town where they met. Unfortunately, the tall, good-looking NASCAR driver experienced cold feet and never showed up at the wedding. Instead, he spent the day with his one true love, tinkering with cars. Meanwhile, LaDonna was left in the church, embarrassed and alone with her friends and relatives. St. James couldn't have thought of a better way to gain the entire neighborhood's exasperation. For the next few years, he was the talk of the town. The mere utterance of his name left a bitter taste in everyone's mouth. Finding a way to escape the wrath of the town folks, St. James discovered what he sought in a newspaper ad. A merchant ship was looking for additional crew members for a long-distance trip. More importantly, all the expenses would be shouldered by the company. St. James jumped at the opportunity. For the next few months, St. James traveled around the world on a ship, despite not having been on a boat before. While on his travels, something unexpected and life-changing happened to St. James. It was an event that instigated his lifelong love and tragic fall from grace. As the ship heaved near the coast of Africa, it was forced to land in Tanzania after a malfunction. St. James had to spend a few days there and acquainted himself with a group of Tanzanian hunters. In a forest hunt, the Tanzanian hunters killed a female chimpanzee after it gave birth, leaving the newborn chimp to fend for itself. Feeling sorry for what he witnessed, St. James decided to care for the animal, and the rest was history. Getting home was difficult, but St. James found a few German missionaries who helped him secure a flight back to LA. At this point, the chimp, or Mo, as St. James called him, was already his boy. Arriving at the airport, Estelle, his mother, welcomed him. Accompanying her was LaDonna, who was fuming with rage and despair. After all, St. James hasn't shown his face to her since their supposed wedding day. As angry as LaDonna was, she couldn't help but notice something was different about St. James. Well, he was carrying a baby chimpanzee in place of his luggage, for one. It was awkward between LaDonna and St. James. However, Mo's arrival in their life helped dissipate any resentment from LaDonna. Sure enough, LaDonna's mother and Estelle, who were close friends, fell head over heels for Mo. Soon, LaDonna did too, and so the couple got back together. On June 6, 1970, St. James and LaDonna became the Davises in a modest ceremony. Mo was the best man. It was the beginning of an unconventional but happy household. Tragic news, however, seldom came at a favorable time. A year into the marriage, LaDonna was diagnosed with cancer. Worse, she needed a hysterectomy. For someone who wanted to be a mother, LaDonna was devastated. She wanted to initiate a divorce from St. James, ashamed she could no longer bear a child. However, St. James only responded with the following: "We already got a kid." As LaDonna wailed on St. James' shoulder, Mo sat quietly on his chair and stared at the couple. From then on, he became their child, a child who was never human, but he was just as complex. There were times when the Davises would be surprised at the range of emotions Mo expressed. As years passed, tragedy found a way to seep into their lives. One day, on August 1998, a welder came over to fix Mo's cage. However, he left a piece of equipment that gave Mo an electrical shock, scaring him and causing him to run away. Missing for a few hours, the Davises were forced to call the police. However, by the time Mo was found, he had already dented a police car and injured an officer. A year later, a visitor came to meet Mo. Despite being told not to put her hand inside a cage, the woman did anyway. Consequently, Mo bit her fingertip, mistaking her red fingernail for his favorite snack, candy licorice. This was the final straw, and the intervening officials of West Covina deemed Mo a danger to the city. Police officers armed with tranquilizer guns arrived at the Davis residence to take Mo. Though he resisted, St. James was wrestled and pinned to the ground. He could only wail as the officers ran inside their house to take his beloved boy. Seeing his father hurt, Mo screamed wildly and banged his hands and feet against the cage. Police swarmed him and shot him with a dart gun squarely in the stomach. Afterward, they tossed the unconscious chimp inside a horse trailer, far from the cozy cage he knew. The dream had unraveled itself, and St. James and LaDonna could do nothing about it. What came after were years of trial and much attention from the public. In 2004, St. James and LaDonna succeeded in getting Mo transferred to Animal Haven Ranch, a private sanctuary where the couple could visit Mo without restrictions. However, on Mo's 39th birthday, a truly horrifying incident would spill into the lives of the Davises. It was a fine morning on March 3, 2005. For the second time, St. James and LaDonna checked the items in the car. They sifted through the piles of toys, balloons, and presents, wondering if they had missed anything. They brought a white frosted sheet cake with raspberry filling. It was Mo's birthday after all. With St. James behind the wheel and LaDonna in the shotgun, the two made their way out the driveway and rode to the Animal Haven Ranch. It was a 3-hour drive, but they were used to it. Knowing their son was waiting for them made the trip all the more worthwhile. St. James hurriedly parked the car in a vacant space near the entrance and grabbed a small carton of chocolate milk. He hopped out of the car and briskly walked toward Mo. LaDonna beamed a smile and followed suit when she brought the cake. Mo clapped his hands and howled wildly, ecstatic to see his parents. He may not have known it was his birthday, but he knew they loved him. LaDonna brought the cake down, cut a few slices, and handed them to St. James and then to Mo. It was a picture-perfect family reunion. However, something sinister brewed in the distance. A few yards away from LaDonna, a young adult male chimpanzee made its way out of its cage and crept slowly toward them. LaDonna spotted the creature, locking eyes with it. The chimp stood formidably, puffing its chest and exposing its entire upper body that was stronger than 4 men. The chimp decided to charge. The eerie silence of the park erupted into chaos, filled with LaDonna's frightful screams. Seeing the chimp run toward his wife, St. James rushed to the rescue. As the two got closer, the chimp reached LaDonna and pummeled her back, knocking her into St. James' arms. The chimp somehow managed to lock its powerful jaws on LaDonna's left hand, clamping on her delicate thumb. The creature yanked on it, removing her finger like a potato from the ground. The chimp wanted LaDonna's head, but St. James managed to push her underneath their picnic table. LaDonna screamed and tried to command the chimp to stop and submit. However, it was to no avail. The wild chimp may have looked similar to Mo, but it was not cut from the same cloth. Blocking the rampaging chimp, St. James readied himself to receive the creature's wrath. However, the 6'2" former running back didn't expect to see another chimp running toward him. It was bigger and older. One look, and he knew it was more dangerous than the first one. His heart sank, and St. James let out an unrecognizable scream. With all his might, he pushed the bigger chimp away, but it pounced on his back, prompting the smaller one to follow suit. One of them clamped its mighty jaws on St. James' face, crushing the bone above his eyebrow. The creatures then stuck its fingers into St. James' eye socket, gouging out his eye. The wild chimps continued to mutilate St. James, biting off his nose and chewing away at his fingers. They tore him to shreds, ripping the face of his skin, lips, and most of his teeth. Finally, as he lay helpless on the ground, they began chomping away at his buttocks, biting his genitals. They castrated him, and there was blood everywhere. LaDonna could do nothing but scream. Eventually, it reached Mark Carruthers, the ranch owner's son-in-law. He came running toward the commotion armed with a revolver. He let loose a shot at the younger, smaller chimp, but it had no effect. Mark quickly ran back to his house and grabbed a more powerful gun. Mark returned, pointed his gun at the bigger chimp, and let loose a shot directed at its head. The chimp's brain exploded, and it fell to the ground. In response, the younger chimp began dragging St. James' body away from Mark. Kneeling down, Mark aimed at the chimp's chest and let loose another shot. It fell down instantaneously, dropping on St. James' back. When paramedics arrived, St. James was unrecognizable. His face was reduced to a bloody lump with a hole. There was so much of his blood at the scene, even the paramedics could not believe the brutality chimpanzees were capable of. The doctors reconstructed his face through dozens of surgeries after putting him into a medically induced coma. In the subsequent investigation, it was discovered that one of the sanctuary owners accidentally left the chimpanzee's cage open. However, even though St. James was now utterly reliant on LaDonna due to his permanent injuries, the two still visited Mo regularly. Unfortunately, tragedy was not done with the Davises. In 2007, Mo disappeared after supposedly breaking out of his cage. An extensive search was done shortly after. However, they found no traces of Mo. The search for Mo bled through the weeks, and then weeks turned into months, and eventually into years. Mo was never found. St. James and LaDonna could do nothing but wait. They still hold out onto the hope that they could see Mo again someday. Today, the life of the Davises revolves around caring for St. James. Although he bears the massive scars from the attack, St. James suffers from a much more painful, invisible wound. I can talk for days about Mo. I just miss him so much. I've never loved anything as much as I loved Mo. After 30 years of caring for Mo, the Davises must somehow find a way to live without him. As for St. James, his life will never be the same, and his scars are just a reminder of the day his pet chimpanzee Mo nearly took him to his final affliction. On the Joe Rogan Experience number 1683, Andrew Huberman tells Joe Rogan about the time tigers escaped the San Francisco Zoo and started eating people.
Years ago, I used to go to the San Francisco Zoo when I was a postdoc. One night I was at the movies in San Francisco, and someone said, tigers escaped from the San Francisco Zoo and are eating people. And I was like, that's crazy. And this was kind of pre-internet.
I remember that.
So these kids actually went to the San Francisco Zoo. The moats were too low. And these kids, it was around Christmas.
Pine cones.
Yeah, they were throwing stuff
I had a
at
bit
them.
about that too.
So this tiger, Tatiana was her name. I knew about her because she had taken the arm of a zookeeper. Eventually, Tatiana the tiger, after taking the arm of one of the keepers, climbed out of the moat because they didn't have the glass guards there, got out. Crowds were spreading. This was near closing time. Tatiana this is what's amazing, wove through the crowd and went and killed one of the kids that had been throwing things at her. So it was targeted revenge. It was not random killing off of humans.
Right.
And then basically slashed up the other kid. And then just sat there kind of, sampling the blood or whatever. The police showed up, they shot Tatiana the tiger. This is all documented.
As horrifying as it sounds, this story is real. Tatiana the tiger escaped its enclosure to attack and kill 17-year-old Carlos Eduardo Sousa Jr. This is his story. The Siberian tiger, sometimes referred to as the Amur tiger, is one of the most majestic animals on Earth and is the largest of all big cats. It is a species of tiger native to the forests of Russia, China, and North Korea. It is distinguished by its enormous size and powerful strength. To put it into perspective, some males weigh up to 660 pounds, equivalent to the weight of a large motorcycle. In addition to their massive size and strength, Siberian tigers have an incredible bite force comparable to that of a hydraulic press or a large crocodile. It is estimated that their bite force is around 1,000 pounds per square inch, strong enough to crush bones and kill large prey, like elk, with a single bite. A human's bite force is only around 160 pounds per square inch. Consequently, the Siberian tiger has one of the strongest bites of any land mammal, helping them become one of the most feared predators in the wild. If that's not enough, Siberian tigers are also powerful swimmers and are not averse to entering the water to hunt or escape danger. While these creatures are highly reclusive, they are at the absolute top of the food chain. Needless to say, they are incredibly dangerous to humans, especially if threatened or provoked. However, because these creatures are now considered endangered, conservation and protection efforts have been made throughout the years, including keeping tigers in zoos. Unfortunately, Siberian tigers have large home ranges, and being kept in a zoo may decrease the tiger's well-being, making them more agitated. Some people prod, tease, or otherwise provoke the animals in the zoo, hoping to invoke an exciting reaction from the animal, which creates a dangerous situation. This was the case with Carlos Sousa Jr. and his friends on that fateful Christmas day in 2007. It was June 25, 2003. The Denver Zoo was home to a small population of Siberian tigers. These magnificent creatures were part of a carefully managed breeding program that aimed to conserve and increase the genetic diversity of the species. In a large enclosure, a female Siberian tiger was born. The zookeepers and caretakers named it Tatiana. Born in captivity, Tatiana was not really an aggressive tiger and had no problems with people. On December 16, 2005, she was taken and permanently moved to the San Francisco Zoo to mate with a 14-year-old Siberian tiger named Tony. Everything was well until December 22, 2006, when Tatiana attacked her veteran zookeeper, Lori Coetzee. In trying to feed her, Lori violated safety protocols and entered the tiger's enclosure alone, without proper notification to other staff members. As Lori approached, Tatiana attacked her by biting and clawing at her, seriously injuring Lori's head, neck, and upper body. Hearing Lori's screams, the other staff members rushed to the scene to help. Thankfully, they were able to safely remove Lori from the enclosure and call for medical assistance. Unfortunately, this wasn't the last time Tatiana would make headlines. It was December 25th, 2007. Carlos Sousa Jr. and his friends, brothers Amritpal and Kulber Dhaliwal, arrived at the San Francisco Zoo, excited to see the animals up close. Carlos was 17 years old at the time, while Amritpal and Kulber were 19 and 23, respectively. The three men marveled at the lions, the grizzly bears, and the primates, but it was the Siberian tiger exhibit that drew their attention the most. As they approached, they saw the magnificent Tatiana pacing back and forth, the creature's amber eyes fixed on them. Carlos and his friends were in awe of the tiger's size and beauty. They watched as she crouched down, muscles ripping under her thick fur, and then pounced on a toy that had been left in her enclosure. Carlos laughed as he watched the tiger play, but then he noticed something that made his blood run cold. He saw that the wall separating the tiger from the visitors seemed shorter, and that it appeared to be lower at one end of the enclosure than the other. Carlos pointed this out to his friends, but they laughed it off, saying that there was no way the tiger could jump over the wall. After all, there were barriers and trenches in front of the wall designed to prevent such a thing from happening. Amritpal and Kulber decided to do something stupid. The two brothers decided to taunt Tatiana. Kulber picked up a pine cone and tossed it toward the tiger in the enclosure. Tatiana stopped pacing and turned her head toward the brothers. Seeing what happened, Amritpal grabbed a stick and threw it in the enclosure. Suddenly, the two began shouting at the tiger, hoping they would get a reaction. Seeing their reckless behavior, Carlos did not want to participate and tried to stop his friends. They listened, but laughed it off. However, it was too late. Tatiana was circling in the enclosure. She jumped from the bottom of the dry moat to the top of the wall, gaining enough height over the top to pull herself over the wall. She eyed Amritpal and immediately jumped on him. The tiger's ferocious claws and teeth ripped apart Amritpal's skin. As Kulber screamed in terror, Carlos tried to save his friend by shouting and throwing things at the angry creature. He then tried pulling Amritpal, but this only provoked Tatiana even more. Tatiana focused on Carlos and decided to pounce on him, quickly knocking the 17-year-old to the ground. The tiger then decided to pull him away from the group, mauling him and biting him in the head and torso. Meanwhile, Amritpal and Kulber ran for their lives toward the zoo cafe 300 yards away. However, since it was already closing time, the cafe was locked. Although the two brothers screamed for their lives, the cafe employees did not think much of it, suspecting that the screaming person was mentally ill and there was no actual animal attack. Eventually, Tatiana arrived at the vicinity and began attacking Kulber. Finally, the cafe employee called 911, prompting emergency services and armed authorities to respond.
I don't know if they're on drugs or what. They're screaming about an animal that has attacked them, but there's no animal out. He's talking about a third person, and I don't see a third person.
Is he saying that he was bitten?
He's saying that it's adult now, he's not drugged.
Is he saying, is the patient saying that he was bitten by an animal?
He's saying that it's bitten by an animal, but there's no animal escape because he could just be crazy.
Okay.
Okay.
4 police officers were dispatched to the area, and the entire zoo was locked down to prevent Tatiana from escaping. What the officers saw, however, was a gruesome sight. It was Tatiana biting down on Kulber, while Amritpal was on the ground, bleeding and screaming for help. The officers pointed their guns at the creature, but they hesitated for fear of hitting Kulber. One of the officers created a distraction, forcing Tatiana to focus on them. As Tatiana angrily turned her attention to the noise, the officers shot her in the forehead, effectively killing the magnificent beast. When the paramedics scoured the scene, they found Carlos dead near the tiger enclosure. He had blunt trauma to his head and neck, scratches and bite marks to his head, neck, and chest, and skull and spinal fractures. His jugular vein was also severed in half. In the immediate aftermath of the attack, the zoo was closed, while authorities investigated the incident and assessed the safety of the animal enclosures. It was learned that the walls for the enclosure were only 12.5 feet high, as opposed to the standard of 16 feet. The surviving victims, Kolber and Emritpal, received medical treatment for their injuries. The attack also sparked widespread public concern about the safety of zoos and the treatment of captive animals. Some criticized the zoo for failing to properly secure the tiger enclosure, while others questioned the ethics of keeping wild animals in captivity. While Kolber and Emritpal filed a lawsuit against the zoo, there were some interesting developments in the case. The subsequent investigations revealed that the three had alcohol in their system. Emritpal had twice the legal limit for operating a vehicle. For Carlos and Kolber, it was still under legal limits. However, authorities also found evidence of use from the three men. On December 25, 2008, a life-sized sculpture of Tatiana was unveiled at the community garden on the Greenwich Steps at 274 Greenwich. A year later, the lawsuit between the two brothers and the zoo was settled for $900,000. Meanwhile, a lawsuit by Carlos's parents was settled on undisclosed terms. In that same year, Emritpal was sentenced to spend more than a year in state prison due to run-ins with the law, including probation violations, evading arrests, and speeding. Additionally, after filing the lawsuit, Emritpal was immediately arrested on suspicion of shoplifting. In 2012, Kolber died of undisclosed reasons at the age of 24. It's very obvious from public records that the two brothers were likely provoking Tatiana, causing her to wreak havoc. Additionally, it was doubly sad that after Carlos tried saving his friends, they ran away from him to desperately save themselves. Ultimately, the aftermath of the Siberian tiger attack was a somber reminder of the dangers of interacting with wild animals and the importance of maintaining proper safety measures to prevent further tragedies. This story goes to show that even while visiting a zoo, accidents still happen, and if you aren't careful, it can lead to your terrifying final affliction. On the Joe Rogan Experience number 1185, Joe and his guest, Kelly Slater, begin talking about crocodile attack stories they've heard. That's when Kelly Slater shares with Joe a horrible crocodile attack on 3 kayakers in South Africa.
There was a horrible story that I read, I think it was in National Geographic, about these two people that were kayaking in a river in Africa, and this guy watched...
The third guy went with them. Did you... This might be a different story.
I don't know. What story did you hear?
This one was like these 2 guys were going to do a first descent down this thing, and they were contacting another guy who had done that river, an American guy.
Mm-hmm.
And the American guy was like, I can't miss this descent. I got to do this. I got to do that whole river. And then the 3 of them got into this zone where there was just crocs everywhere, and the river was real slow and wide. And as soon as they got there, all the crocs came off the river bank, and they were like, oh shit, there's like tons of them.
Oh.
And this guy's theory was to take his helmet and throw it off to the side so it would be like movement and distract them, and they'd attack that, and he'd paddle it to the shore. And all 3 of them got together, and the American guy was on the right side, and the other 2 guys were together, and they were so close they could, like, the guy in the middle, like, couldn't really paddle. He was just kind of like, you know, trying to move along with them. And so they figured if the bigger we are, the bigger we look and more intimidating, like maybe we'll be okay. 15, 18-foot croc comes up, grabs the guy, pulls him out of his kayak, disappears, they never see him again. His backpack floats up. And then his stuff's floating downstream. The other 2 guys get out of the water, and I think I'm telling the story pretty good because I read it like 5 times online too. And they got out of the water, and then there was a little village just down, and there was a little bridge over, and there were some boats, but the boats were all dry docked. And they went down, and in broken English, there was one person that could talk to them or whatever, and they said, we know our boats are not in the water because there's too many crocs here. Like, we know not to go in the water. Because they were like, we need a boat, we got to find his body, we got to try and save him, you know? And then they went to this bridge and watched this stuff like float by.
That's the same story.
Yeah, and the guy wasn't supposed to be on the trip.
And there was about the guy, the kayak flipping and then pulling his body out under the kayak.
Yeah, brutal.
The man who fell victim to this crocodile attack is Hendrik Coetzee. This is his story.
Hendrik Coetzee always knew death was coming for him. He often spoke of it, knowing his adventurous lifestyle was pushing him to his premature end. But his cravings for adventure overcame him. In his memoirs, he wrote of feeling a deep depression as soon as each expedition was over. He was only ever happy when he was alone, pushing himself to his limits and way beyond. Hendrik grew up in South Africa. He found school tedious and boring, but thrived in the arts. After graduating, he went traveling before joining the military. At the age of 21, he was back on the dark continent and was looking for adventure. In 1997, the mighty Zambezi River, bordering Zambia and Zimbabwe, was fast becoming a hotspot for thrill-seeking tourists. Outfitters set up bungee jumps and skydives over the awesome Victoria Falls, but most popular of all was whitewater rafting. As a cocky 21-year-old Hendrik, who had never kayaked or rafted a river in his life, landed himself a job with Peter Meredith's whitewater rafting company. After learning how to roll and ride a kayak in a swimming pool, Hendrik took to one of the world's most advanced commercial rivers. He guided tourists through Grade 5 rapids and quickly became a popular guide. Peter described Hendrik as having more balls than brains, and on one occasion, whilst the entire group portaged their rafts and kayaks around a deadly Class 6 rapid, Hendrik ran at it in his kayak without telling anyone. He barely made it through, but thought he was the bee's knees. Peter warned him he'd be fired if he ever pulled a stunt like that again. Peter and Hendrik became good friends. In 2004, they embarked on an epic adventure with a small team. The task was to follow the River Nile from source to sea. They paddled the 4,130 miles from Lake Victoria to the Mediterranean together. This preceded Hendrik's solo paddle of the Congo a few years later. The journey took him 5 months to complete. He survived being ambushed and hunted by cannibalistic Gombe tribesmen. He dodged hippos and crocodiles. He slept on the banks of the river, protected only by his bivouac and the flames of his fire. After returning home, Hendrik decided that it was time to settle down. This adventurous lifestyle couldn't last forever, and he was taking too many risks. He had met a girl and realized that there was perhaps more to life than adrenaline-filled expeditions. But these feelings weren't to last long. In 2010, an email pinged in his inbox. 2 professional American kayakers, Ben Stokesbury and Chris Korbelik, wanted to navigate the upper Congo River. They knew Hendrik was the perfect guide for the job. Hendrik stood fast on his original decision, no more kayaking or exploration, but he was happy to help them plan their route. He wrote a detailed itinerary for them, adding detail that only an explorer of his caliber would know. As he mapped out their journey, Hendrik felt that familiar restlessness return. The call of the wild echoed once more in his ears. After months of helping them plan their trip, Hendrik finally relented and succumbed to the promise of an epic adventure. The trio set out on the 2-month trip through the Congo's tributaries. They began along the Ruzizi River at the end of October 2010. They planned to be home by Christmas. Hendrik's girlfriend was looking forward to seeing him again after what he promised to be his final expedition. It turns out he was right. Whenever the 3 kayakers paused along the river to rest or make camp, they would speak with locals who lived on the riverbanks. They had an agreement with the International Rescue Committee, who helped refugees and rural communities. In exchange for some logistical help, Hendrik had promised feedback from locals. Upon speaking to one community, they were told that, as well as needing clean water and education, they also needed help tackling a major crocodile problem. In the past 20 years, 125 people had been taken by this prolific predator. Hendrik and the other made a mental note of this comment. What they didn't know was the years of battles in the region between neighboring communities had resulted in more than 5.4 million people being killed. Most of these people had been dumped in the rivers. Most of these people had been eaten by crocodiles. As a result, these reptilian beasts had grown to enormous sizes and had a taste for human blood. On December 7, 2010, the trio had been paddling for some time when they came to a sharp bend in the river. Although Ben and Chris were professional paddlers and well known in the world of extreme sports, Hendrik had to teach them how to kayak in the African wilderness. He taught them to regularly tap their kayaks to create noise, stay away from eddies where hippos might attack, and keep clear of sunbathing crocodiles on the riverbanks. On the day of the attack, the 3 of them had spotted a few 3-foot crocodiles on the muddy banks. They were harmless, and the trio glided by, admiring the natural scene from their plastic boats. If a larger croc was spotted in the water, protocol was for the 3 kayakers to come together and paddle as fast as they could to outrun the potential threat. So far, the journey had been broken up into hair-raising whitewater obstacles and calm, gentle stretches that meandered silently through the still African bush. Around the corner, the river was about 100 feet wide and flowed gently. The 3 men were paddling close to one another. They had to concentrate so that their blades didn't touch. Ben was slightly in front, Hendrik in the center, and Chris trailing a few yards behind. Ben's eyes darted from left to right as he scanned the waterways and sloping embankment for any sign of trouble. The water was so calm, with the only ripples emanating from the men's paddles. There were no telltale signs of predatory crocodiles or territorial hippos. Usually they would spot the knobby protrusions of a crocodile's log-like head and 2 gleaming eyes just above the water's surface, but today was different. Unbeknownst to them, something was stirring underwater. Something was stalking them from the murky depths. Nothing could have alerted them to this stealthy predator, not a ripple nor a bubble, until it was too late. Ben looked back over his shoulder to check the others were keeping form. As he did so, he saw an enormous crocodile silently emerge from the water just to Hendrik's left-hand side. Hendrik gasped at its sudden appearance and cried, "Oh my God!" It wasn't a cry of fear, terror, or desperation. It was more a matter-of-fact exclamation. To suddenly see the biggest crocodile lift its head out of the water had taken Hendrik completely by surprise. Those were the only words he managed to shout. In an instant, the crocodile had grabbed Hendrik's left shoulder in its jaws. It pulled him underwater quickly like lightning. The immense pressure from a bite force of over 4,000 psi seized Hendrik, crushing his chest and neck. Hendrik was fastened snugly into the cockpit of his kayak. Ben and Chris watched in abject terror as the upturned kayak shook and tumbled above the water for a few agonizing seconds. Then the kayak was pulled downwards and out of sight. Moments later, the red plastic boat bobbed back up to the surface and righted itself. The cockpit was empty. Hendrik was nowhere to be seen. Hendrik was likely to have been taken to the bottom of the river where the crocodile began its feast, knocking the air from his lungs, disorientating him with sharp twists and rolls in an attempt to drown its prey. Mercifully, Hendrik likely passed out from the immense compression on his body before being taken down under. Judging by the size of its head, the crocodile was estimated to be about 15 feet long, weighing in excess of 2,000 pounds. Ben and Chris made a mad dash for it. Paddling with all their might, they churned through the green Lukuga River. Frantically, they made their way to the riverside village of Kabeamaji. Firing their kayaks at the riverbank, they leapt out and ran into the village, shouting for help. The locals fled in a mad panic. The 2 white men, donning life jackets and helmets, had taken them completely by surprise. But when everyone had calmed down, Ben and Chris managed to ask for a motorboat to go and look for Hendrik. The villagers shuffled uneasily and shook their heads. They told them that they no longer set foot on the river, because in the last 5 years alone, 7 of them had been taken by the crocodiles, simply plucked from the decks of their boats. Ben and Chris dashed onto a nearby bridge, desperately looking upstream for their fallen friend. The entire village, some 200 people, followed them. Then they saw something. From around the corner, something floated into view. A black paddle, and then Hendrik's red kayak bobbed up and down on the river, floating closer and closer, and then passing under the bridge, right beneath Ben and Chris's feet. It was immaculate, no sign of a struggle, no scratches, no cracks, no blood. Hendrik was never seen again. Sensing something wasn't right, Hendrik's girlfriend logged onto Facebook. Her heart skipped a beat as messages of condolence for Hendrik appeared on her screen. This couldn't be happening. This must be some kind of mistake. They were supposed to be meeting soon. He was nearing the end of his expedition, his very last expedition. Distraught and devastated, Hendrik's girlfriend still journeyed to the Ugandan bar on New Year's Eve, where they were planning on meeting. Through the dimmed lighting and steady bass beat of the music, she searched the hazy dance floor for Hendrik, still hoping upon hope that she would see that dazzling, confident smile pop up from the crowds. The clock struck 12, the partygoers erupted in cheers, but Hendrik was nowhere to be seen. he had met his unfortunate final affliction.
On the Joe Rogan Experience number 1288, Joe Rogan and his guest, John Reap, react to the footage of a menacing lone wolf crossing the street in Russia.
You ever seen this video? This one's great.
No.
Look at the size of this thing. Comes out of the woods and walks across the street. Look at this.
Oh my God.
Of this.
That's a bear.
That's such a big wolf.
That's a bear. No, that's a wolf.
I wonder what
the is that?
It's a big ass wolf. That's what that is. That's probably
Damn.
130-pound wolf or something.
Where is this?
Joe Rogan then goes on to talk about the phenomenon known as wolf super packs.
Russia's had real legitimate problems with wolves. Where in Siberia, they have these super packs. They would get together because they were starving. So they'd get 100 wolves who would form a super pack. Because they could kind of do whatever the they wanted once they got that big.
Yeah.
And they started killing horses.
Yeah.
Going to horse stables to just
A bunch of wolves take down a horse easy.
The story of a super pack of 400 wolves descending on a Siberian village to eat the horses is true. The story ended with the death of 6 children. This is the story of the Siberian super pack of wolves. The continent of Russia hosts some of the coldest permanently inhabited places on the planet. Among them is Verkhoyansk, which is the most remote rural areas in the northern hemisphere and holds the record for the coldest temperature ever recorded in the Asian continent at negative 67.8 degrees Celsius. In this part of the world, the unforgiving sub-zero weather is the order of the day all year round. Survival is only reserved for those who are willing to fight against all odds. The land is covered in snow, and the extreme temperatures are so harsh that Joseph Stalin, the Soviet Union leader, would cast rebels as well as his political enemies into this tundra, where their odds of survival were next to nothing. The area would soon earn the name Stalin's Death Ring, and decades later, even after the end of the Soviet Union, it is still wrapped in mystery and rumors of the dark deeds that took place here many years ago. Its ominous reputation has kept away potential inhabitants for years, with the 2010 population census revealing that only 1,311 locals still live here in this harsh terrain. However, even in this harsh environment, the area is filled with animals such as musk deer, moose, both brown and polar bears, Arctic hares, as well as gray wolves, which have learned to coexist in this frozen biota. The farms here are speckled with reindeer, and their antlers add a touch of fanciful charm to the otherwise mundane snow-covered tundra. They are a part of the way of life because the locals keep them for their hides, meat, and milk, and as a means of transport because they can pull heavy loads without breaking a sweat. For a long time, the humans and the wildlife here have cohabited peacefully, with everyone keeping to their respective boundaries. However, the winter of 2012 was a peculiar period, to say the least. A mass die-off of the hares saw nature respond in the most horrific manner possible. Being the gray wolves' primary prey, the cyclical collapse of the rabbits made the wolves shift their attention from their usual food sources to anomalous sources. Verkhoyansk authorities state that the wolf population is normally around 500, but in the winter of 2012, there were around 3,500 wolves. This dramatic and drastic increase in the wolf population overburdened their usual food supply, and with a decrease in the number of hares, the wolves soon ran out of prey. Their small packs of 6 to 7 wolves got desperate for something to chew on, and therefore they had to stretch their limits. They merged these small packs, forming a super pack of over 400 individuals, and began prowling at the edges of the villages to pursue larger game. Typically, gray wolves carefully choose the most nutritious prey that they can get without endangering themselves. With a brain size larger than that of the domestic dog, they are not only cunning but more intelligent, and will instinctively start preying on dangerous animals when they run out of safer options. Having run out of hares, and with the population of wild reindeer slowly dwindling, the wolves had now turned their ferocity toward the villages that bordered the forest. This was worrying to the villagers because they were short on manpower supply to fight the rapidly rising wolf superpack. To make matters worse, the use of leg hold traps, which had proven to be one of the successful ways of catching the wolves, had been outlawed back in 2005. The wolves seemed aware of this, and they gained momentum and strength as they descended ruthlessly and went on a slaughter in the village on both the livestock and the eventual humans. Driven by their primal hunger, the superpack moved as one, a relentless force of nature that would strike in the still of the night. By dawn, the once orderly rows of livestock pens would be left in disarray, a haunting scene of chaos and destruction. Within 4 days, the 400 wolves had killed 30 horses. This startling behavior of the superpack left the farmers in fear, but this was just the beginning of their rampage, and things would only get worse from here on. They preyed on anything that crossed their path, and the domesticated reindeer were not spared either. Being domesticated came with a disadvantage for the reindeer because they didn't have the necessary survival instincts compared to their wild counterparts. They provided no challenge to the hungry superpack and were thus easy targets. No reindeer group was protected enough to keep a group of 400 hungry wolves at bay. Moving from one farm to another, they killed a total of 16,111 reindeer. By now, the death toll of horses had also shot up to 313. Villagers hoped that the 16,111 reindeer and 313 horses in their bellies were enough to satisfy their appetite. But they were wrong and far from the reality of the situation. Their appetite was insatiable. The superpack had tasted blood, and they just couldn't get enough of it. They ran a riot and went on a killing spree, eventually attacking a group of 6 children who were walking home from school. The wolves killed and ate them to the marrow of the last bone, leaving the villagers dumbfounded. The superpack had not only led to damages worth $5 million, but also targeted small children. They had to act, and act fast. Regional authorities got wind of the news, and President Yegor Borisov swore to help salvage the situation. He hatched a 3-month campaign plan to rid the town of the overwhelming superpack. A state of emergency was declared, and 24 teams of trappers and hunters were put together under his authorization. The teams were to patrol the tundra on snowmobiles and set wolf traps. In the daytime, the hunters were to use helicopters from where they would execute their order to shoot to kill. President Yegor also offered bounties worth $250 per wolf hide and a grand prize of $33,000 for the top hunter who brought in the most hides. This incident drew the attention of animal activists who pointed fingers at the unregulated and continuous hunting of rabbits by humans and blamed it for the increased wolf attacks. Others raised doubts on whether the hunters would be successful in bringing the wolf population down to the ideal 500. They claimed shooting that many wolves was unrealistic. On the other hand, biodiversity protection programs insisted that the number of wild animals, including hares, fluctuates naturally and is fueled by many factors, such as weather and die-offs, after a number of years. In simpler terms, nature readjusts itself. But the Verkhoyansk superpack attack is not the only attack of hungry wolves in Russia's history. During the carnage of World War I, wolves thrived in plenty. In 1916, during the third icy cold winter of World War I, German and Russian soldiers faced off at the Baltic Sea with a front line stretching far to the Black Sea when a superpack of wolves hungry for blood attacked them. The war had wiped out the last remnants of the European buffaloes, which were the primary prey for the wolves in the war zone. This led them to find other new food sources, which they found in man. At first, dead, injured, and isolated soldiers started disappearing into the night from their camps. But the wolves shifted their gears a notch higher and began attacking the entire squads. Their attacks were so vicious that the two armies were forced to declare a truce, despite being sworn enemies and at each other's necks for almost 3 years. The armies then joined and formed hunting parties. Together they hunted and killed hundreds of wolves, eventually eliminating their threat. They then declared an end to the truce and resumed their real battle, killing each other. Today, the system of bounties is still operational in many parts of the chilly northern hemisphere, and money is set aside for this purpose. Bounties have proven to be cheaper and more effective in reducing the overall wolf numbers to avoid similar incidents. The regional government has also encouraged culling of wolves by designating an annual holiday for hunters, which is held on the second Saturday of April. However, despite these efforts, experts believe that the wolves have maintained their preference for the freezing northern realms, but will continue to stalk the dotted villages in this tundra. Life in the northern hemisphere is a constant struggle, and a pack of hungry, ravenous wolves is just one of the many dangers. With wolves being able to give birth to 5 pups at a time, it's only a matter of time before another super pack emerges from the forest, bringing with it our final affliction.